Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we have, I would say, something a little bit special, but actually it's something for me, this one. I want to get into chat to someone that has always been a bit of an influence in my time making hobby videos, and that is a certain Mr. Warren Johnston, as you can see there. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm the best, Andy. How are you, my man?
I'm not too bad. All the better for seeing you, mate. So we're very lucky to have a little bit of time with you today. I wanted to take that opportunity to find out a bit more about you. We see you on screen a lot with the different games that you play over the years, but I don't know if folks kind of get to know about you and where you come from and where Beasts of War and OnTableTop come from. So let's start with that. What's your origin story? If you were a Marvel character, what would that origin film be?
Yeah. Look, I have had a deep-rooted love for miniatures and fantasy worlds and science fiction from a very, very young age. You know, it's Star Wars was a huge influence on me as a youngster growing up. Loved having Star Wars toys and AT-ATs and the likes. Same, and then other stuff. You know, I was just hooked on things like the old Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers and all of that. At the age of about 8, 9, 10, from then up, I started to get into. See, I've got to try and frame this. So, you know, I talk about I started to get into like Dungeons and Dragons. But not real Dungeons and Dragons. This was our version of Dungeons and Dragons. There was dragons and there was the dungeon, but that was it. We didn't have any source books or anything else. It was all completely made up because we just didn't have access to a lot of that. And then we got a copy of Hero Quest. And man, that ticked all the boxes. It ticked all the boxes right there. You know, that what I call the 2.5D dungeon. The orcs, is still my favorite model. Orcs with a sword over his head, still my favorite model of all time. And, you know, that was the only kind of Games Workshop product that was available to us. Myself and my brother Lloyd, we grew up in Northern Ireland. Heck, we didn't even have a McDonald's in Northern Ireland until I was a teenager, you know, and you know, there was reasons, you know, we had the Troubles and stuff going on. A lot of the bigger companies didn't want to be in Northern Ireland, and we would my grandfather and grandmother would take us on holiday to the coast, so we'd go up to the seaside, and there was a particular kind of like a shop newsagent kind of thing at the seaside, and there we were able to get a copy of White Dwarf. So once a year we maybe got a copy of White Dwarf, and back then we were looking through it, and it was basically the whole back of the book was a catalog of Ralpartha models and things like that, and it was all mail order, but we never got to mail order any of it. But that same seaside town had a toy shop, and in that toy shop they had Hero Quest. And they also had Keller's Keep and a couple of other things. And we were very fortunate. My father bought that for us, and that was it. We were hooked, you know. And again, like the only paints that we could find, we had a nearby toy shop, and it was them on thick enamel paints. We're slapping it on with the terrible paintbrushes that you would have got in a watercolor paint set or something with the really hard plastic bristles. You know, we were making parchment out of, you know, steeping paper in coffee and then put it in the oven and do all sorts of things. Heck, we even I remember us painting the skeletons in the Hero Quest box with coffee, because we thought, oh, it stains them. Makes them really look like so we were making washes out of coffee back then, you know. Yeah, but so it was, but you know, that love of miniatures, of fantasy worlds, because that was my first real kind of dive into fantasy world in my mind. You know, like fantasy movies before that. What did you have? You had like Willow and some of these, kind of things. So, it touched on fantasy, but fantasy in my own mind, based on the fighting fantasy worlds, which I discovered shortly after that, based on Hero Quest. The beautiful thing about Hero Quest is there was no lore really in it, but it had all the visuals there to unlock your mind. Yeah, and that has never changed for me. The fantasy world in my mind, even to this day, is the one that I try to protect at all costs. Yeah, and it's not that it's documented or anything else. No. I just love the freedom to let ideas blossom and fantasy worlds blossom and all in my mind. So I don't pay a lot of attention to a lot of canon lore and stuff like that there. Other people love all that stuff. Me, I just love the freestyle fantasy worlds. So, I'm old school in that sense. Orcs are evil in my world. So it's these kinds of things, and it's just what I happen to enjoy. Yeah. So that was great, and that stayed with us right up until we were I don't know, 13, 14, maybe 15 years old, and then girls. Yeah. So girls and guitars, and I went from being a fantasy guy to my career path was I literally was going to become James Hetfield. So it was like
at least it was planned out. At least you knew what you were going to do. That's it,
man. That was it. I was, from 15 years on. That my career goal was to become James Hetfield. That was it. So
there's still time. Don't give up. That's it. There's still time. I think actually, from what you were saying there, I think we probably started at around a similar time. I won't be impolite and ask your age, but I think we probably started around a similar time and started off a similar way. But I think the difference was I didn't have the brother to play with. I had a younger sister who was a little bit too young to kind of like play those games with us. I didn't really have any friends who were interested, and I think that for me, it kind of faded away, and I didn't rediscover my love of it like till much later, like into my kind of 30s and stuff. So I think if I had a friend or a brother that was into it, I think I probably would have went down very much that similar path. Sort of similar thing, Humbrol paints, painting them little kind of Citadel miniatures from a little toy shop local to me, picking up Hero Quest, same kind of stuff. So I guess
it was having the ability to share that with my brother. It's as brothers, we were close when we were younger. We were a little bit less close when we were like in our teens and stuff. He had his group of friends. I had my group of friends. You know how it is. But that closeness, that connection on all things, on miniatures, on fantasy, on this little thing was what ultimately we ended up back together and working. We've spent the rest of our adult lives now, together working with toy soldiers, and it's been great. I've been very blessed to have been able to have undertaken this throughout my life with my brother. It's I wouldn't have had anybody else. Everybody else in the circles. Northern Ireland is quite a rural place, so they're either into farming or they're into football. I wasn't into either. They're thinking of Massey Ferguson's. I'm thinking X-wing fighters, man. And so it's I was I was an outsider by all measures. I was an outsider. So
I guess that you said there, obviously you've spent all that time working with Lloyd now as well. So how did Beasts of War come about? Because I mean, when did it actually start? It's been around for quite some time now, isn't it?
It has been around a while now. Yeah, it's almost difficult for me to pin down when we actually started now, because what happened was myself and my brother, we worked when we were teenagers. We actually started our first company.
Okay.
I know it just was. There was always a little fire of an entrepreneurship in there. Yeah. So myself and Lloyd, through our university years, we actually ran a small digital media company. So we were into web design and multimedia and stuff like that, and it actually paid our way through university. We took our student loans and we spent them on computers and networking, and in our student flat, we actually had desks all the way around it with all of our computers and stuff set up where we ran our business while we studied. So, it paid our way through university, and copious amounts of drinking at the nightclubs, man. So, because we were just at that point where web designers were becoming cool. Yeah. So, we ended up continuing that, and and we had a great time. We traveled the world doing digital media. We worked for companies in a lot of different places, and we worked for some very, very large companies as well. But we always had that hankering, and it's going to sound strange. It's not coming from a big-headed place. It's coming from a different place. We always wanted to tackle a project where the remit was, what's it going to take to be the best in the world?
Yeah.
What would it take to be the best in the world at this? What could we do to do that? Because when you're working for other companies on a contract basis, it's always great at the start when you're there brainstorming and they're saying, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do the other. But then reality kicks in and everything gets pared down, and you never get the opportunity to realize the vision in many respects. So we, around about 2008 or so, 2007, 2008, by this stage we had kind of forgotten about miniatures and that, we do it. I'd spent so long headbanging, chasing after ladies, it's running digital media, that we had effectively forgotten about it. But we decided that what we wanted to do was take a part of our time, the company's time, and put it into an in-house project, something that we would build from scratch, something that we would have complete ownership of, and see where we could take it. And we wrote that down on a piece of paper. What's it going to take to be the best in the world? And from the perspective of, not that we could crow about being best in the world, but literally, what would it take to try and do that? You've got to see if you can realize that.
You've got to aim for something, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is it. It's So we looked at a number of different things. Obviously we were into our video games and stuff at the time, but video games were very well served by the mid 2000s. There was the big video game sites. They were all there. It was all grand. We looked at gadgets because we were into our gadgets and stuff as well. Gadgets were a little bit less served. There was still an opening there, but the issue we had with gadgets is we couldn't see how you could pull a tight-knit community around gadgets when gadgets are so diverse. There's gadgets for everything. So, and it just looked like an awful lot of hard work and an awful lot of dealing with China, to try and do anything with the gadget side of things. So I was one day walking past a charity shop, and I went in, and lo and behold, up on the shelf was a copy of Space Crusade. Now, we didn't have Space Crusade when we were younger. We always wanted it. and I swear it was like 10-year-old Warren just leaped out of me. And I went up and I got it for like £1.50. I think it's sitting up on one of these shelves here. I can actually see it from here. And I picked it up for £1.50. And I brought this home, and I called up Lloyd. I said, "Lloyd, get over here! I've got Space Crusade!" And it was just like something had flicked. And there was a couple of components missing. So I thought to myself, I'll go and see if I can find them. And I went online. I went on to eBay. And I was like, I suddenly saw this world of different miniatures and things like that there, because obviously 40K had come on such a lot since since when we'd been playing it in the 90s up until the mid 2000s. I was just blown away by this. And then I went round, I was looking at the different websites, and it was great. They were all crap. And and I said, Lloyd, I don't believe this. I said, do you remember whenever we used to spend every summer working on Fantasy Worlds, and we used to work on an Amiga with deluxe paint, doing little orcs and maps and stuff like that there? I said, how do you fancy doing it again? How do you fancy us having a crack at that and see what it would take to be the best in the world? And that was it. We looked at it and we thought, oh hell yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. And that was it. We started to take steps to get back into it. I started to reach out to some folk in the industry and have conversations. And mostly I just wanted to learn and listen. Yeah. And it's and hear just what their thoughts were. The industry back then, you had one massive behemoth, which was Games Workshop. Games Workshop were doing well, at the time. They were in fact just about to enter the hard times, because their first bubble was built off the back of Lord of the Rings, if you remember. Yeah. And when the trilogy finished, then they had a substantial collapse in sales and stuff off the back of that. So they had a major retrenchment that they went through. And we happened to fire up in and around that time of the retrenchment. Yeah. And why that's interesting, Andy, is because during that retrenchment, a lot of their star players were either pushed or left Games Workshop, and they went on to start the Warlords, the Mantics, the River Horses, of course, and so they were starting just about the same time as we were starting. So that little ecosystem then all started to build together. We were all in it together. We were all trying to find our way.
Bit of a perfect storm, I suppose, at that particular time, from a point of like you see that I guess the birth of wargaming started to grow out of that. Really, there wasn't a lot of sort of big companies. You kind of touch on sort of reaching out to industry and stuff. How were GW back at the time? Because I know things are very different now. How were they receptive back then to kind of what you were trying to do, or was it?
Well, we had a couple of sit downs with GW back in the day, because we had thought about doing an e-commerce element to Beasts of War at the time. Beasts of War was either going to go, it was always going to be very media focused with video and stuff like that. But when we were looking at, we weren't too worried about the how it was going to fund itself, where its earnings were coming from. It was very much if we build it, we'll find a way. So we had looked at the potential of e-commerce, and I remember us sitting down with one of their heads of, I don't know, it was like a head of trade sales or something like that, and he was with us, and we were showing him. Back then, we were showing him stuff that we had developed, which was were doing all the 360s of the models. We had a Space Marine painting thing that we had built in Flash, where you were able to pick colors, and it went over an actual photo of a gray or black and white, a real model Space Marine, and we used the filters and stuff in Flash so that whenever the colors went on, it actually properly colored it with the contours. Stuff that you're only really now seeing in the last couple of years. Obviously, the stuff that now is executed much, much better, but these were the kinds of things that we were showing them. We were explaining to them, about being community focused. So a couple of things happened. So so these are a couple of big moments that defined the start of our project, right? We were very heavily 40K focused to begin with. So when we launched the YouTube channel, so we launched on YouTube first. There was no beastsofwar.com
Okay.
At that stage. So we had launched on YouTube first, and we started to build up on YouTube, and we were gaining subscribers at a very, very fast rate. And the YouTube closed our channel and refused to tell us why. We were lucky enough that in the digital media business at that point, we were actually managing a lot of companies that were paying a lot of money to Google. We happened to be managing a company that was paying about 3 million quid a year to Google at the time. So I was able to go down to Dublin and actually have a meeting with them, and they wouldn't tell us why they closed the channel. They said what had happened was whatever it was automated, and it deleted it and wiped it, and there was no getting it back, and that was it.
So they were never going to admit that there was an issue or anything, because at that point there was no recovery, was there?
No, there was nothing. There was nothing they could do, and we must have had 40,000-50,000 subscribers on that channel. But we started again, and by that stage we had been working on what would become a beastofwar.com, but our whole outlook changed. In that moment, our whole outlook changed. We no longer wanted to be a YouTube-centric entity.
Yeah.
Because I never, ever wanted to become reliant on another platform again.
I can imagine.
I just never wanted to do it again. And both myself and Lloyd said, look, it doesn't matter what it takes or how hard it's going to be now. We will never become reliant on another platform again. Because if they can have an automated system that can just pull the rug out from under your feet like that, what was the point? What's the point of all that energy, all that work, all that money to try and build these things?
Yeah.
So our whole thought process of what beastofwar.com started to evolve, and we went down that route. And then obviously we had to start thinking in terms of, well, how are we going to fund this? And it was at that point, around that time, this is where that other rail of Games Workshop letting seasoned people go and them starting up their own businesses. Yeah. Started to discover this much wider world of miniature gaming, like a much wider world. Even back then, there was so much going on. There was Flames of War. There was no bolt action or anything yet. Warlord were still just producing little bits and pieces of weird, wonderful historical kits that I knew nothing about. I still struggle to know anything about, but I know I love them. And so we started to meet these folks, and we realized, we could grow together, on this. So we did. We started to reach out, and we started to do that. At that point, then Games Workshop contacted us and said, we want to work with you. We'll provide you. We'll provide you free product. I said, well, sooner or later we're going to have salaries and stuff that we want to pay on this. So we need to think, well, no, we'll provide you free product, but there is a condition. And what's that condition? We want you to stop working with.
Yeah, interesting.
So I politely said no.
Yeah,
and that was that. And Games Workshop went through the period of being hostile. Not only to us, hostile in general.
Yeah.
To the creator community. We just happened to get some fairly hostile approaches from them.
Yeah.
But it literally, it was a case of, Workshop at that point would work with you, but only 100% on their terms. They had no interest whatsoever. And this is something to understand about that company. Yeah. They see themselves as a self-contained hobby in themselves. They don't see themselves as part of an industry. They see themselves as an independent industry of their own. Yeah. And that's fair enough. They can do that, and they can think of them in whatever ways they want. But that's not how I think of them. They're part of part of an industry to me, and always will be just a part of an industry to me. And it's the other part of the industry that, for all of our sakes, I love to see growing, because I think that we all benefit whenever there's innovation and strength throughout the entire industry, or throughout most of it anyway. Because I think it keeps us honest.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, I mentioned at the start there kind of like how yourself and Beast of War were a big inspiration when I kind of started sort of my little kind of sort of YouTube journey, I suppose. And it was the fact that it wasn't just Games Workshop stuff. It was the fact that it opened people's eyes to the wider world, and it almost created a community out of hobbyists, as opposed to I play 40k, therefore I talk to 40k people. It was about creating this community of hobbyists, and that's only gone from strength to strength over time. I mean, you recently just kind of clicked over to your 100,000 subscribers, which is a great milestone, and even I don't know necessarily if people always kind of realize, but not always focusing on the flavor of the month, or focusing on the kind of the big hitters, if you like. It's a real hard slog. It's like swimming against the tide sometimes. So to get there, it's to be commended, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic achievement.
That has been a hard slog.
Yeah,
that has been a hard slog. The secret to this is YouTube have very specific algorithms. Okay, so if you want to be a YouTuber, you have to play to the algorithms. I remember I had a meeting with some YouTube account managers at the time, and we were looking through the channel, and they said, "But this is easy for you." They said, "Just follow the analytics. The analytics is telling you what to create." I said, "Yes, but we're not about analytics. We're about giving as balanced a view of an entire industry as we possibly can. Because remember, this industry is niche, but this industry has a bunch of niches within the niche.
Yeah.
You know, so we've got to be able to do that." And they said, "Well, no, the answer is just stop making that content and just focus on the content that gets the views." And I said to them, "Well, look, could we run multiple channels? You know, because obviously we want to try and find a way around it if we can." I said, "Look, could we run multiple channels?" Wouldn't entertain the idea with us at all. They said, you could. They said, "Theoretically, there's nothing stopping you, but we won't work with you to do it." Then we got the question of, so how are you making your money? And so, well, do we really need to tell you that? And I'm convinced to this day. that guy had a switch that basically said, "Let's make it twice as hard for these gits as it needs to be." And it has been very much like that. But at the same time, as I said, we made the conscious decision that YouTube was not the platform.
Yeah.
It was a platform.
Yeah.
We always, like, for years, every video we uploaded to YouTube, we uploaded a backup copy of it elsewhere, that if ever the same thing happened again, we had one setting within the Beast of War source code that flicked over to the other to the other setting, the other channel. So Mel, the terrain shooter, had an interesting one. He has this little, he has this app that analyzes keywords and stuff like that. And one day he'd made a video with us or something like that, and he sent me this screenshot of the analyzing it. And beside the keyword "Beasts of War" was this warning sign, and I was like, oh. So so this is the beginnings then.
Yeah.
Of the transition from Beasts of War to OnTableTop. This is where the story goes for why one became the other.
Yeah.
The world changed as we continued to grow. Beasts of War was the name that we picked because it was funny and it was fun and it was a bit of crack, But the world around us evolved, and the kinds of content and stuff on YouTube evolved. So violent content and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They obviously had to find ways to kind of deal with that, And again, automation is is the most crude thing. It really is. You know, it's even today, we had a video that was age restricted, okay, which was about building a smoke machine into an orc, okay, it's just so steam and stuff would come out. They age restricted it because they think it's about vaping or about teaching children how to smoke. I asked for a manual review, and they still age restricted it. You know, so even the manual review couldn't possibly be a manual review.
No, not at all. Otherwise, anybody seeing that would have blatantly understood what it was. Oh.
So we saw this trend kicking off, and we thought to ourselves, look, we have ambitions of where we would like to see this go.
Yeah.
We can't always be at the center of it. I can't do this forever.
Yeah.
And there will come a point when nobody wants to see a 50-year-old fat guy cooing and screaming over minis. Okay? You know, it's nobody wants to watch that. Not when they've got all the handsome guys like you, Andy, out there. You know?
I'm not that far off 50 myself, mate, to be honest. I've got a birthday in a couple of weeks and I'm getting a bit scared now.
So one of our ambitions, myself and Lloyd, was to take our platform and open the platform up then to others. Yeah. I'll come back to that a bit later. But part of all of that then was, you know, obviously Beasts of War itself, even the very name was starting to cause issues.
Yeah.
We were starting to see content being flagged. You know, Mel had sent through that thing. So we're fortunate enough that we know Angry Joe. Yeah. So we reached out to Angry Joe, and I said, you know, is there anybody in YouTube you could put me in touch with just to have a chat with? And they put us through, and once again, they couldn't tell us anything. And I said, but look, okay, you can't tell me anything, but can we rename the channel? Can we, if we rebrand and we come up with a new name and stuff, which is something we were thinking of doing anyway, as a refresh to the whole thing. Can we rename it and see if that has an effect? And they said yes. So to be fair to them, they did facilitate that for us. So we went through, myself and Lloyd went through, I think it was about 18 months we worked in the background on tabletop, and you know, the brand for it, our thoughts on where it would go, and we launched that, and it never, you know, on tabletop, you know, I would be the first to put my hand up and say, you know, it doesn't have the personality of Beasts of War, but on tabletop is the brand for a platform. Yeah. You know, it's Beast of War. I'll always be a Beast of War. You know, it's and the ultimate plan is that Beast of War is one of many that just live on the platform.
Yeah.
No, it's taking time to get there, but recently, we've now started to be able to make our first tentative steps. So we have a growing group of creators, including yourself, Andy, that we're now working with in the background. You know, we're working away on introducing the ability for others now to publish onto the platform, and the whole concept being it's more curated. You know, it's all still there on YouTube, but it's just a curated way for you to be able to find content that relates to the thing that you're interested in, rather than relying on YouTube. So that we have other ways for you to go in and navigate all of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart move. I mean, OnTableTop as a brand it's kind of starting. I guess in the early days, everybody was it's always Beast of War, but I think it's definitely starting to kind of drift across now. It's starting to kind of embed itself. It's a really brave move to rebrand as well. It's something I've considered, because when I started my channel, it was like I didn't even know what I was going to make content about. The name was intentionally kind of like a bit vague, really. It was just, and it's like over time, it's one of them things where I think, have I gone too far to the point of rebranding now? Do the people know that? So it's a brave move to sort of have that change of direction. But I think
it was a combination of choice and necessity. So there's once again. We're not in isolation of the world. It's events sometimes overtake you, and what myself and Lloyd try to do is whenever events overtake us, whenever we're starting to feel like our backs are against the wall a little bit, rather than respond to it as a threat, we try to see where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
And come at it from a positive place.
Yeah.
Rather than just being defensive, we look at because myself and Lloyd are always at our most comfortable when we have the opportunity to be creative about something. And we just feel better about ourselves. This is it's about nothing other than we have a short time on this whole planet, and I'd like to spend as much of it as I can, feeling good and enjoying myself.
Absolutely.
So so when backs are against the wall, it's not just about kicking in the defenses. It's let's get creative here. What can we do? Where can we go with this? So OnTableTop has been born out of a lot of love. Myself and Lloyd have a deep love of OnTableTop and what it's going to represent, what it represents, and where it will be. Because the beauty of that is that OnTableTop's future doesn't lie solely in our hands.
Yeah.
And that's a very exciting thing for us. So
amazing. I mean, you were just kind of saying there about kind of like sort of, looking for the positivity and stuff like that, looking for the positives and things. And something I think that Beasts of War and OnTableTop have always brought has been the positive aspect of tabletop gaming and the enthusiasm from yourself and the other presenters. After all this time, what keeps that enthusiasm high? Because I've only been doing this 5 years, so I'm not quite burnt out yet. I can imagine there's been sort of peaks and troughs for you.
You go through it, man.
Yeah.
Go through it. I'm just coming out of not a trough. I'm just coming out of a half slumber, you might say. In recent times, a lot changed. Obviously, the company now joined the larger Wayland Group. I can talk about that as well in a minute. But as well as that, myself and Andrea moved house with 4 children. So there's been a lot of turmoil. I've also had very dodgy internet. This is the best quality video I've been able to produce since spring. Because
willingness,
this is it. I've been relying on a 4G connection, okay, and it was working great during the winter.
Yeah.
And then from spring on, it got worse and worse and worse. And then we discovered it was because of trees and bushes that were growing and blocking the signal.
Oh, no.
So now that we're getting back into the autumn again, the leaves and all are coming off. So the connection is now coming back. So I'm back, baby. so that has caused it. So that has given me a little bit of I know not so much a break because I've been working all the way through it, but it's what motivates me. I love it, man. I just love. Look, I love minis. I love the industry. I love the community, and I love cool games. And it's I love the variety. I'm blessed in the variety and the diversity of games and things that I can get to sample, and do I get days where I'm tired and stuff like that? Yeah, I do, and I'm getting older, so the aches and pains and all set in, and it's everybody's going to get their days like that, and I'm sure they'll become more frequent. But I've got to say, on the whole, I still feel like 10-year-old Warren at times. A lot of the time. A lot of the time, dude, I would work on a project, right? So I have 2 projects on the go at the moment, right? that I'm doing on my own little YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've been watching. Yeah.
Oh God! So look, as part of this creator thing, where we're grouping up with other creators and OnTableTop as a platform, I made the decision to eat our own dog food on this. Okay, so I've launched a channel from scratch that only I work on. I have to do all of it. So I'm absolutely putting myself in the seat of a creator so that I can see firsthand how difficult it is for people to create content and do all of those things. And Lloyd is giving me no help. He keeps I am literally having to do all of this myself. So I've got a project on that. I'm recreating I've a Skaven army, a Ratman army that I'm working up into a rules agnostic fantasy army. So I am now at the stage where I don't build armies to match the rules. I change rules to match my armies. That's how it is. That's how I go. I also have I've decided that I made the biggest dungeon mistake of my life 10 years ago. I had Hearst Arts, and I have a dungeon that's lots of little individual tiles and stuff that's put down. I've now decided it's the worst thing in the world. I'm changing it all. But if you come over to the channel, you can watch me on that one. But dude, while I'm doing that, I still play Metallica Master of Puppets. And that is the album, because back then me and Lloyd had it on record and we used to put the LP on. And whenever that album plays, it wouldn't matter where I'm at, even listening to them live playing it, I still think about orcs. This is in me. This is in me, and it will always be in me. And I just there's nothing I can do about that. So, motivation. Yeah, it's look. Nobody does this for the money, man.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. What I would say is like in all the time I've kind of watched you and watched the channel. It's that passion and enthusiasm that comes across, and it can't be faked. People know when that kind of stuff is like kind of it's put on for camera or whatever, like that fake excitement of this new product kind of thing, and just seeing that enthusiasm coming through is what's kind of it's infectious. So thank you, because it helps me as well.
You're welcome, man. Let's bring as many people with us as we can.
There's a big boat. Let's all get on it.
Yep.
So we kind of talked there about how YouTube's changed, the world's changed around it and stuff. But how in all that time while you've been, I guess, even from being a kid playing games, but more so from like being in and around the industry, how do you feel tabletop games and the tabletop industries evolved? Because does it feel more professional now? Does it feel there's
a lot more corporate. Yeah, it's a lot more corporate now. Even the small guys have become very corporate over the years. So we're in a tricky phase of the industry at the moment. So obviously, back at the start, Workshop were going great guns. 5th edition and stuff came out, but then they dropped the ball a little bit. Their aggressive approach to creators and their aggressive approach to their own community, shutting down all the forums, shutting down the ability for people to communicate. It had a great impact in that it opened up the opportunity for a lot of the smaller guys to start to make inroads. And boy, did they do it. And we ended up in one of the most innovative cycles this industry, let me rephrase that. We ended up in the most innovative cycle this industry has ever known. That period of the 2010 on, say 2013 or so. It was a huge range of innovative new products, innovative new companies, loads going on.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where there had been too much. So the community grew, but the community was still spread very thin across a lot of that. Then obviously we had the New Games Workshop, which was the same as the old Games Workshop. So we had the New Games Workshop that came up, the open cool the Games Workshop, and to be fair to them, there are some people in there that genuinely believe in that and are trying their best to do that. And we met with them and we got asked pretty much the same question we did the first time. We'd be willing to work with you, and this time very much willing to pay and everything. But again, those conditions you have to stop working with, and we got the list, a different list, but
a list nonetheless.
A list nonetheless, and I'm just not interested. No. I'm just not interested. So, but that resurgence has had an impact on the industry. Now, the older heads, older and wiser heads, even in mine, in this industry, are biding their time. They're retrenching where they need to retrench, and they're biding their time, because I used the word cycle quite deliberately, because there is a little bit of the what goes around comes around in this. And we know that when Workshop does well, and that later down the cycle, the industry benefits from that.
Yeah.
So in this particular cycle, it's difficult because Workshop also brought back into the fold a lot, and Workshop is very much an ecosystem. Workshop cover every base. Okay, when you are in there, they don't want you to look outside of that for anything. Okay, even your scented candles now will be coming from them. So but this is very much their strategy. It's that ecosystem. Okay, and that's why it'll always be difficult for entities like ourselves and them to not to coexist. We can coexist fine, but we'll never be bosom buddies. Because it's massively important for them to maintain that walled garden, that ecosystem where paints, supplies, novels, scented candles,
soft
hoodies,
toys now, everything,
everything is in there. But we also know that sooner or later people will lift their head and go, what else is out there? And that's where ourselves, yourself, and us, we that's where we step in. And that's why, a lot of, people will notice that a lot of my stuff, even over these 10 years or whatever, I'm still very focused on newbies and people taking those first steps in, and the everyman approach, because, there will always be a steady stream of new people that want to get in and enjoy this hobby. So we are in a phase at the moment where there's no doubt a lot of companies out there are hurting. There will be elements of consolidation. We started to see that a while back with Asmodee even picking up lots and lots of different companies and growing that way. Workshop's resurgence has done harm, but equally for those of us that ride that out, when that cycle starts to rotate round again, I expect that we'll see huge interest in alternative stuff, and we're starting to see it even a little bit now. Actually,
I get that feeling. We feel like whether we're on the cusp of that cycle change or whether it's just a little bit of a blip at the minute. But I definitely feel that there's people are sort of expanding their horizons a little bit and just kind of tentatively looking to see what's out there a bit.
But look what's happened. Look what's happened over the years. We went from a phase where everything was in metal. I'm going to put my hand up. I love metal. It's to resins, and then they started to experiment with the plastic-y kind of resins.
Yeah.
Then so many companies then managed to start getting actually proper injected molded plastics.
Yeah.
Now we have innovations where there's is almost like a in-house injection molded resins and stuff that they've got. With Sealcast, we interviewed them at UK Games Expo. Their system looks phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, and it's priced at a bracket where these medium-sized companies are able to put this in and take that manufacture in-house. On top of that, look at the. Even the quality of the components. You look at what was in a board game back in, say, 2010. Grab yourself a copy of Dungeon Saga, right? Grab yourself a copy of Dungeon Saga with a little thin card and stuff. Now, at the time, I loved it, but you have to remember, that wasn't me then. It was 10 year younger than me, and that we were seeing new, fresh alternatives coming through, okay?
Yeah.
You compare that to the latest box of Descent that came out.
Oh,
okay,
unbelievable! Yeah,
and this is where we're at. You have companies like in that time you have companies like Mythic who managed to make 15 mil cool for half an hour. And it was like so it's like, but these are the things, and this is what makes the industry really, really interesting. And it's about to get a hell of a lot more interesting as well, because 3D printing is now well on its way, knocking on the door. We have another quantum shift in how this industry could go. And I've got to say, I'm a little bit of an anarchist at heart. Okay, so, and even if I suffer at things, if there's an opportunity to be disruptive and to see a little bit of mischief happen, I sometimes just can't help myself, So I'm kind of rooting.
Just poke the hornet's nest now and again.
So never ever ask me to get involved in a referendum or anything like that there, because if there's something that's going to wind people up, I'm going to look at it and go, oh, it's hard to resist.
It's funny. It's funny you're saying that, because I mean there is that. It really is on that cusp of kind of like of that shift. We're already seeing people talking more and more about 3D printing. I mean I'm not somebody that kind of prints a lot of 3D miniatures, but I do have a resin printer and I have a PLA printer, and I'm printing off tokens, and I'm printing off bases, and I'm printing terrain, and it's all just. It's almost about as plug and play as it's ever going to get. Really, it's not that far away now from just being able to. It's getting
really close now, man.
Yeah,
it's getting really close. We've just seen 2 areas come out recently. One is the super large format resin printers like Elegoo, Saturn, and Jupiter, and stuff. But the other thing is the Anycubic then. Their latest printer is DLP, so it's a digital light projection. So it's a different technology. It's more efficient. It's higher resolution, and it's more robust. You'll get 20,000 hours out of a DLP printer, before having to change the screen. Whereas you might get 1,000 hours out of the LCD approach to this. It's we are boy, that the 3D printing, that's the ultimate cutting out of the middleman right there. It is the ultimate cutting out of the middleman. And I've been preaching it. I sat in a meeting in 2013 and described to some folk where things were headed and on how 3D printing was at the center of it. Yeah. And I'm telling you now that is it's a natural law. Anything that cuts out elements in the process that can create efficient, faster, cheaper process, it's going to succeed sooner or later in some form.
It's moving fast as well, though. It's not like, especially when it comes to kind of resin technology. PLA maybe not so much, but resin technology is it's advancing at a fast rate. I mean, there's a new Elegoo printer out about it feels like every 2 or 3 months there's a new one out.
Well, I have two very simple questions people need to ask themselves. When was the last time you booked a flight via a travel agent?
Yeah.
And when was the last time that you got in your car and drove to a news agent to find out what the news was?
Everything moves on. Everything changes. That's the only constant, isn't it? Everything's going to change.
Is the only constant.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's exciting times as well. I mean, you've got all of those kind of sort of, I wouldn't say cottage industries now so much, but the smaller producers that are kind of coming up and with their Patreons, with their different STL files that they're doing and stuff.
That.
And what it's doing is it's enabling the fact that there's, I guess in kind of what we've been talking about we're making content about the stuff we're passionate about. Those guys are actually finding a way to fund their passion and to make the models that they're passionate about, not just, oh well, I need to go and work for Workshop or something and be a sculptor there, or I need to do something that's mainline to make enough money from it. It's
and
amazing.
We all benefit from that. Yeah, because this is where we get diverse, interesting, off the wall, anarchist safe models, and this is very much my position is we all see things from time to time that we disagree with and whatever, but I love the fact that we are rapidly in and moving more and more towards an environment where that can happen, because I believe in variety. I believe in artists being able to express themselves, and obviously there's limits. There's limits to everything, but in general terms, we can only benefit from having artists going completely left wing of where you thought they were going to go. And doing, I don't know, mushroom riding rabbit man from hell. It's a winner for somebody.
It is. And that's the thing. I mean, times have changed. It's not a case of sculpting something and then having to try and advertise it in a magazine somewhere that might get a small circulation. Like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you can get it online and get it in front of people, like there will be other people who like what you've produced. That's just the way it works now, and it's really exciting.
Niches of the niche, exactly, niches of the niche.
Yeah, we touched briefly before about you guys selling OnTableTop to the Wayland Group, and so how? I guess first of all, how did it come about? Was it something you were looking to sell, or did they come to you? And secondly, kind of, what does that mean for the future of OnTableTop and I guess some exciting changes?
Well, we talked to Wayland about the possibility of it. It wasn't really a case of us approaching them or them approaching us either. It was just kind of something that kind of happened. Like, we have a long history with Wayland. We've had good times, we have hard times or whatever, but we have a long history with them. We know them. We know those guys. They have grown phenomenally over the years. Like, they're huge. We grew as well. But obviously we're still like a minnow, in terms of that. But considering the product that we had, we grew into something substantial for the product that we had. We actually started talking about the possibility and what it might unlock for us pre-pandemic. So before the pandemic even hit. And then the pandemic hit. So I've got to talk about this from a couple of different angles. Okay. Obviously, selling a company is partially based on your personal thoughts on the thing. Yeah. And then also looking at it from the company's perspective, or in our instance, the community's perspective.
Yeah.
There's always a risk whenever you put something like this into someone else's hands ultimately. And to be fair to them, on tabletop has operated as it's always operated. There's never been any interference, never any negative interference. They've only assisted. We have project managers now, and we have all sorts of support and stuff in place. They've been phenomenal, and the team in there are some of the most genuine, caring people that I've had the chance to work with, and that was why the first opportunity I had to bring Free over to our team. Free was working within the marketing department within Wayland. We had her on, and she was just talking about some of the stuff that they had done on the Wild West Exodus front and the likes. And we just fell in love with her. She's just amazing. She is absolutely amazing. So when we had the opportunity, Wayland, we're only too happy to set free, and let her join us. And she's adding so much to what we do and to our team. And it's great. Wayland have really been doing their best to give us the scope to do what we need to do, but give us the support.
Yeah.
So in our conversations, we had always seen that it would open doors, it would open opportunities. There would be threats and stuff as well that we'd have to contend with. From a personal perspective, running a business is a stressful old thing.
Yeah.
And you can be doing really, really well. But it doesn't get any less stressful.
It doesn't get easier, does it? Yeah, it gets harder.
Even when you're doing well, and it's and I wanted to at the point myself and Lloyd were having to think, look, our ambition is for OnTableTop to become platform, to have many, many more creators involved in its future than just us. So in many respects, it's quite logical for us to divest ourselves from that, because if anything, that will allow us to be uncompetitive. We don't feel the need to compete with creators. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It breaks 100%. Down. Just breaks down those last few barriers of of that, and we look at creators as just partners, as people that we want to have create great stuff with. So
it's a conversation I've always had. Is that basically like there are some creators who find other creators as to be competition now, to be like I don't want to say enemies, but like to be kind of like a barrier to them doing well or whatever. But for me personally, it's always been a case of that I can never ever make enough content that somebody can only ever watch what I make. I'm not passionate about some things that you might be absolutely over the moon about. So what better way to kind of to share that around and to be able to work with other people and to bounce ideas around people than to kind of be part of that type of thing. So for me, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Well, this was it. And it was, myself and Lloyd, we had sat down, we had been through the rebrand. We were primed to the point now of moving to this next phase of exploring it as a bigger platform that the community can involve themselves more in, other creators can involve themselves more in. And it really was a case of, Lloyd, this actually makes logical sense now for us to, we're not taking a step back. We'll be more involved than ever, but we don't necessarily feel as personal about it. We still do. It'll take a long time before we never feel personal about it. But
of course,
you know what it is. It made sense from that perspective. Also, for my team, I wanted to be able to give the team some security, because we were doing well. We've always been fortunate enough that we were doing well, but you're paying the wages and stuff at the end of the month and the likes, and you never big enough to truly be able to hand on heart say to the team, your job will be here this time next year. Do you know what I mean? You're always you're never totally insulated from a shock.
It's not the kind of thing where you're like, you're not selling stuff. You're not selling stuff like orders 6 months in advance or anything like that. It's a month to month kind of business type thing.
So it's so even like we always kept reserves in the bank and stuff like that there. But it was always a case of both myself and Lloyd were always acutely aware that being a small business or whatever, you're never insulated from a shock. So. We were in these conversations. It was all making a lot of sense. Yeah. And pre-pandemic, we tentatively agreed that let's go through the due diligence process on this. Of course. And when we get out the other end of it, we can see. And we agreed some kind of terms and stuff on how it was going to be and who staff would be protected and all of this kind of stuff. And then the pandemic hit. And I was terrified. And I was terrified not because of the COVID or whatever. I was terrified of the potential effect that this could have. This was one of those shocks that a small company may not be able to get through.
Yeah. And
to this day, I hope I'm not breaking his confidence or whatever, but to this day, I'm thankful to the chief executive of Wayland Games, because when lockdown hit, bless him, he messaged me and he said, I want you to know this changes nothing and the terms will stay the same regardless.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Richard Lawford is called a lot of things at times, but I've got to say he didn't need to do that. Yeah. He didn't need to do that. And and it's a credit to the man that they're in a time, and I've got to say, no, I was worried. I was deeply worried. But that message will stay with me for the rest of my days. And he showed us a loyalty then, and a commitment at a time when. Effectively, he could have just waited and picked us up for nothing, or picked up the remnants of it potentially for nothing. But no, I think it shows the caliber of the man, and I hope I'm not breaking his confidence there. But I think it's important. It was a big moment in my life, and it was justification at the time. For myself and Lloyd to think to ourselves, look, you can never know if the decisions you've made are the right ones, but you can at least look at what's happening and make an assessment. And I thought to myself, it was an important moment. It was an important moment, and it solidified my commitment to the new project.
Yeah, and I think from the other side of the fence, as somebody who just sort of watches the content and looks on the website and sees OnTableTop as that platform, it hasn't changed. That the fact that that's happened hasn't affected it. It hasn't sort of deteriorated. It hasn't become corporate. It's still the same OnTableTop, and it's still the same content, and it's still the same folks behind it. So it's really
we've been more affected by leaves growing on trees than we have by our dark overlords. I was
going to say maybe the dark overlords could just bring a permanent winter and get the trees to disappear. Maybe that'll do it.
No, I've got to say, there's a lot of interesting things on the way. There's a lot of resource that is sitting and available to us. But like everything else, we need to be in a position to spend that resource. Do you know what I mean? To utilize that resource. People could throw stuff at you all day long. I could throw you 1 million sprues, and you're 1 million sprues better off, but you can only work with one at a time.
Absolutely. And I think people sometimes forget that bit, is that you've got your nose to the grindstone. You're producing the content, and you're doing your interviews, and you're doing your gameplays and the paintings and everything else. And actually, there isn't any time to free up to work on the new stuff. And you're not making enough money to bring anybody else in to work on the new stuff.
But the thing is, you could, we're at the point we could bring more people in, but we don't have the time to train them. So this is why Free was a little angel, a godsend to us, because she came in with the skills we needed, and she's just been great. So we're kind of just we have a lot of big plans. They just will take time to execute, and it's not because anybody is holding them back. Nobody's holding anything back. It's just literally a case of
just
there's
takes
only
time.
so much you can do. There's only so much you can do.
There is.
But Wayland, to be fair to them, have been phenomenal in their support of OnTableTop, of the staff, and of the community. They are acutely aware and concerned, about the community, and they do, they would never do anything without, asking us behind the scenes. So, would the community be okay with this? Would this upset anybody, or would they like this to happen, or like that to happen? And it's it has been good. Look, I can't predict the future.
Of course,
no one can.
Of course,
but at this moment in time, I can't fault them. They've been great.
I think that's really good to hear. Warren, I won't take up any more time. I could literally sit and talk to you all day. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'd love to do it again in the future as well when we've got more to talk about.
You'd be very welcome, man. I can come on and blether anytime.
Let's definitely do it in that case. And blethering's good for me. Warren, thank you very much, mate, and thank you to everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching my video. I hope that you really enjoyed it. And if you did, why not consider clicking on the suggested video below to see more of the work that I've done. If you'd like to support the long-term sustainability of this channel, why not consider checking out my Patreon, where you can pledge and support from as little as $2 a month. And there is lots of different tiers and bonuses, which will give you access to a private Discord server. It will give you free t-shirts, free mugs, a podcast every month, and a number of other things, including getting your name at the end of every video, like these awesome folks who already support me now.